You shared your bed with me, human. Brace yourself, she want to do mating. The steady hum of the medical bay's life support systems was the only sound breaking the silence as Nera opened her eyes. The dim emergency lighting cast a soft blue glow across the small room, barely illuminating the unfamiliar surroundings. Her violet skin tingled with the lingering warmth of the body beside her. The human engineer, Julian. Nera shifted slightly, careful not to disturb him. Her greenish-silver hair fell across her face as she studied his sleeping form. The attack on their research expedition had left them both injured, though Julian had suffered worse. The memory of the crystalline creatures emerging from the caverns made her shoulder throb where one had slashed her. The ship's systems had been damaged in their hasty escape, leaving only this single medical pod with functioning heat. Dr. Takeda had insisted they share it. Body heat will help stabilize both your conditions, she'd said matter-of-factly before sealing the medical bay and heading to repair the communications array. But for Nera's people, the Vasari, sharing sleep space was an ancient ritual, a declaration, a promise. Julian's breathing changed rhythm, and his grey eyes opened, focusing slowly on her face. "Hey," he said softly, voice still rough from sleep. "How's the shoulder?" "Healing," Nera replied, her accent giving the word a musical quality. She sat up, the thermal blanket falling away. The simple medical garment she wore revealed the healing scar across her shoulder, already fading to a silvery line against her violet skin. "Julian, we must discuss what has happened." He pushed himself up, wincing slightly at the movement. "The attack? I've been thinking about those crystal formations. I don't think they were actually sentient, more like a defensive system for—" "Not the crystals," Nera interrupted, her emerald eyes serious. "This," she gestured to the narrow medical bed they'd shared. "On my world, this has meaning, significance." Julian blinked, confusion evident on his face. "Sharing the bed? You invited me into your healing space, offered warmth." Nera's voice was formal now, almost ceremonial. "I have accepted. By the traditions of Vasa, I am ready to complete our union." The engineer's eyes widened. "Union? Like marriage?" "A bonding, physical and spiritual." Nera tilted her head, studying his. "Reaction. Your offer was clear by our customs. You shared your sleeping space freely." Julian ran a hand through his dark hair, careful to keep his expression neutral despite his surprise. "Nera, I think we might have a cultural misunderstanding. For humans, sharing a bed can be intimate, yes, but it doesn't always signify that. You did not intend to initiate bonding?" A faint purple flush colored her cheeks. "We were injured. There was only one working heater," Julian explained gently. "Dr. Takeda suggested it for medical reasons." Nera's posture stiffened slightly. "I see. A practical arrangement." Julian noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, not quite embarrassment, but something close to it. "It's a beautiful tradition, though," he added quickly, "that something so simple could mean something so profound." Her emerald eyes met his. "You are not amused by my mistake?" "Of course not," Julian said, his voice soft but firm. "Different worlds, different meanings. That's why we're out here exploring, right? To understand each other better." Nera nodded slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing. Outside the small window of the medical bay, the stars hung silently in the void. The research vessel drifted, damaged but stable, through the unfamiliar system. "Perhaps," she said finally, "we could discuss more of our cultural differences while we heal." Julian smiled. "I'd like that." A small alert chimed from the console beside the bed, indicating the ship's systems were beginning to restore themselves. But neither moved immediately, both sensing that something important had begun. Not the bonding ritual Nera had expected, but something equally significant: understanding. "Tell me about Vasa," Julian said, settling back against the pillow, making room for her to sit comfortably. "Start with this bonding tradition." As Nera began to speak, the faint humming of the ship seemed to fade into the background, leaving only her voice and the quiet space between two people from different worlds finding unexpected common ground. The medical bay's lighting had shifted to a warmer hue, simulating daytime aboard the research vessel Horizon. Julian sat cross-legged on the bed, facing Nera, as she explained the intricacies of Vasari bonding traditions. "Sleep is vulnerability," she said, tracing abstract patterns on the thermal blanket between them. "To share it willingly is to say, I trust you with my defenseless self." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "That makes perfect sense, actually. Humans have similar concepts, but we've complicated them over time." "How so?" Nera asked, her emerald eyes focusing intently on him. "Well, sharing a bed can be intimate for us, too, but context matters. Family members might share sleeping space out of necessity or comfort. Friends, too, sometimes." Julian smiled ruefully. "I once shared a tent with 3 other engineers during a planetary survey. None of us proposed. Marriage afterward." This drew an unexpected sound from Nera, a melodic trill that Julian realized was laughter. It was the first time he'd heard it from her. "Your species fascinates me," she admitted. "So many unspoken rules. On Vasa, all is clear. Intentions are declared through actions with known meanings." "Must make things simpler," Julian said. "Simpler, yes, but perhaps—" Nera hesitated, searching for the right words. "Perhaps less room for discovery." The ship hummed around them as they continued their exchange. Julian described Earth's varied cultures and their different approaches to connection and intimacy. Nera explained the crystalline architecture of Vasari cities, designed to amplify the subtle telepathic connections her people shared with those closest to them. "Can you read my thoughts?" Julian asked suddenly. "No," Nera replied, the silver-green strands of her hair catching the light as she shook her head. "The connection requires both biological compatibility and intention, even among my own people. It forms only after the bonding is complete." Julian's hand unconsciously moved to the healing wound on his side. "What happened on the expedition? Those crystal creatures. They reminded me of how you described your cities." Nera's expression grew thoughtful. "I noticed that as well. They reacted defensively when our scanning equipment activated, almost as if they were protecting something," Julian finished her thought. "Or someone." A comfortable silence fell between them. Dr. Takeda had checked in briefly via comlink, reporting that the ship's engines would be operational within 12 hours. Until then, they were confined to the medical bay, still under observation for potential complications from their injuries. "May I ask you something personal?" Nera ventured after a while. Julian nodded. "Have you ever experienced bonding by your customs, I mean?" "I was engaged once," he replied, surprising himself with his openness. "It's a formal agreement to marry, to bond. It didn't work out. She was also an engineer, brilliant at her work, but we wanted different futures. She's heading a terraforming project in the Proxima system now." "You speak of her with respect," Nera observed. "I respect passion. She knew what she wanted." Julian smiled slightly. "What about you? Have you bonded before?" Nera touched the faint scar on her shoulder. "I was promised once in the traditional way, but he died during the stellar confluence, when radiation from colliding neutron stars bathed our colony world." "I'm sorry," Julian said softly. "It was many cycles ago." Her voice was steady but held a distant sadness. "I chose the path of research afterward. The stars called more loudly than the traditions of home." Julian found himself studying her face, the delicate structure of it, alien yet expressing emotions. He perfectly understood. Her violet skin had a subtle luminescence under the bay's lights, and the silvery green hair that framed her face seemed to shift color with her movements. "What does this mean on your world?" he asked quietly, reaching out slowly to touch a strand of her hair. Nera's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. "It is an expression of admiration, acceptable between friends." "Good," Julian said, drawing his hand back. "Because I do admire you, Nera. Your courage during the attack, your knowledge. I'm glad we're friends despite the awkward beginning." The ship's alert system chimed softly, indicating that Dr. Takeda was requesting a remote vital sign check. As Julian reached for the console to acknowledge, the vessel suddenly shuddered violently, throwing them both against the wall of the medical bay. "What was that?" Nera gasped, steadying herself. The emergency lighting flickered on as the regular systems failed. The calm, automated voice of the ship's AI filled the room. "Attention! Unknown energy signature detected. All personnel, secure your stations. This is not a drill." Julian and Nera exchanged a quick glance, their conversation forgotten as the research vessel trembled again under some unseen force. "I think," Julian said grimly, "our crystal friends might have followed us home." The emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the medical bay as Julian helped Nera to her feet. Another tremor shook the vessel, less violent than the first, but lasting longer. "We need to get to the bridge," Julian said, moving to the storage compartment where their uniforms had been stored. He tossed Nera her red research jumpsuit and quickly began changing into his own Navy engineer's garb, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing wound. "The doctor ordered us to remain here," Nera reminded him, though she was already slipping into her uniform with efficient movements. "Medical override," Julian replied with a grim smile. "Ship in danger takes precedence." The corridor outside, the medical bay, was eerily quiet. Emergency strips along the floor pulsing with directional lighting. Julian instinctively moved to the nearest terminal, his fingers flying across the interface. "Primary systems are failing sequentially," he muttered. "Something's interfering with the power distribution." He looked up at Nera. "What do you know about those crystal entities that could cause this?" Nera's emerald eyes narrowed in concentration. "They exhibited properties similar to quantum resonators. If they're somehow attached to the hull, they could be creating harmonic feedback in our systems," Julian finished. "We need to get to the sensor array." They moved through the ship as quickly as their healing bodies allowed, occasionally bracing against walls when tremors struck. The Horizon was a mid-sized research vessel, with a crew of only 12, most of whom had been on the other side of the planet when Julian and Nera's expedition had been attacked. "Dr. Takeda should be in the communications hub," Nera said as they approached a junction. Julian nodded. 2 levels up, but first, he pulled open a maintenance hatch revealing a narrow service tunnel, shortcut to the external sensor controls. The cramped tunnel forced them to move in single file, Julian leading the way. In the confined space, Nera could smell the faint scent of him, something earthy and distinctly human that she found strangely comforting. "These crystals," Julian called back to her as they crawled, "you said they reminded you of Vasari architecture. Could they be artificial?" "Not exactly," Nera replied, her voice echoing slightly in the metal tunnel. "Our structures amplify natural abilities. These entities seemed more like guardians or antibodies." They emerged into the sensor control room, a circular chamber with screens displaying the ship's exterior from multiple angles. Julian immediately went to the main console while Nera moved to the viewport, peering out at the stars. "There," she said suddenly, pointing, "on the ventral hull." Julian adjusted the external cameras, zooming in on the area she indicated. The image clarified to reveal dozens of crystalline structures adhering to the ship's hull, pulsing with an internal light that synchronized with the tremors. "They're drawing power from our systems," Julian said, fingers dancing across the controls. "And they're growing." Nera joined him at the console, their shoulders touching as they both leaned in to analyze the data. "The resonance pattern is similar to Vasari communication methods, but much more primitive. Almost like they're calling for something," Julian suggested. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "We need to try communicating back," Nera said firmly. "If I can reconfigure the external emitters to match their frequency." "It could buy us time," Julian nodded. "But we'll need to bypass the safety protocols. The emitters weren't designed for this kind of output." They worked in perfect synchrony, Julian rerouting power systems while Nera programmed the resonance patterns. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to. Each anticipated the other's needs, passing tools and making adjustments without prompting. "Ready," Nera said finally. "But Julian, this will drain significant power from life support. We'll have perhaps 20 minutes before critical systems begin failing." Julian's expression was determined. "Then we'd better make this count." He activated the modified emitter. The ship's trembling intensified momentarily, then settled into a steady vibration. On the screens, the crystalline entities pulsed more rapidly. "They're responding," Nera whispered. Her fingers flew across the interface, adjusting the frequency. "I'm trying to establish a pattern they might recognize as non-threatening." The ship's comm system suddenly crackled to life. "This is Dr. Takeda to any responsive crew. What's happening with our systems?" The doctor's voice was tense but controlled. Julian activated the response channel. "Takeda, it's Freeman. We're in sensor control, attempting communication with the crystal entities attached to our hull." "You're supposed to be in medical bay," Takeda responded sharply. "We got bored," Julian replied dryly. "Listen, we need your help. Can you make it to the bridge? We need someone to monitor life support while we try this." There was a brief pause. "On my way, don't do anything irreversible until I get there." The connection cut off, and Julian turned back to Nera, who was staring intently at the readings. "Something's changed," she said. "Look at this pattern." The crystalline structures were pulsing in a new sequence, 3 long, 2 short, repeated. Julian frowned. "It's too regular to be random," he said. "Almost like a greeting," Nera finished, her eyes wide with excitement. "Julian, I think they're sentient after all, and they're trying to talk to us." As if confirming her words, the ship's trembling stopped completely. On the screen, the crystals glowed steadily, waiting. Julian looked at Nera, saw the wonder in her eyes that matched his own. In that moment, despite their different worlds and the misunderstanding that had begun their connection, he felt they were exactly where they belonged, together, facing the unknown. "Let's answer them," he said, softly. 3 days had passed since their first successful communication with the crystalline entities. The Horizon now drifted in stable orbit, its systems restored but modified to accommodate the symbiotic relationship they'd established with what the crew now called the Resonance. Julian stood in the newly created interface chamber, adjusting the harmonization equipment he'd designed with Nera's guidance. The room hummed with energy as crystalline fragments, willingly detached from the main cluster, resonated in carefully calibrated containment fields. "Frequency stability at 97%, Julian noted, making a minor adjustment to the field strength. "Better than yesterday. They're adapting to our methods," Nera replied from her position at the translation matrix. Her silver-green hair was pulled back now, revealing the elegant curve of her neck as she bent over her work. "Just as we adapt to theirs." Dr. Takeda had finally cleared them both for regular duty, though she insisted on daily check-ins. The rest of the crew had returned to the ship, fascinated by the discovery, but leaving primary communication duties to the pair who had established first contact. Captain Winslow entered the chamber, his weathered face serious. "Progress report. We're beginning to decode their conceptual framework," Nera explained, gesturing to the complex patterns displayed on her screen. "They don't think in words, but in resonance relationships. Harmonies represent connection. Dissonance represents threat." "And what do they want?" the captain asked. Julian stepped forward. "As far as we can tell, they're custodians, or perhaps parts of a larger consciousness that protects the crystalline formations on the planet. Our scanning equipment disrupted their harmonic fields. They perceived it as an attack," Nera added. "But now they recognize our difference. They're curious." Captain Winslow nodded slowly. "Keep me updated. The Science Council is very interested in establishing peaceful contact. They've authorized extending our mission by 6 months." After the captain left, Julian and Nera continued working in comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging ideas or observations. The easy rhythm they'd developed felt natural now. Their initial misunderstanding transformed into something deeper, a partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection that neither had openly acknowledged. Hours later, as ship's night approached, Julian straightened from his console, stretching his back. "We should take a break. Even the Resonance cycle through rest periods." Nera nodded, shutting down her station. "The observation deck should be empty at this hour." The observation deck was the Horizon's crown jewel, a transparent dome offering unobstructed views of space. As they entered, the automated systems dimmed the ambient lighting, allowing the stars to shine more brilliantly against the void. They stood side by side at the railing, gazing at the blue-green planet below and the crystalline formations visible, even from orbit, vast structures that glittered like frozen lightning across the surface. "It's beautiful," Julian said softly. "When we first encountered them, I never imagined that they would teach us so much." Nera finished. "About communication, about perception." She paused, then added more quietly, "About connection." Julian turned to look at her profile, illuminated by starlight. The violet hue of her skin seemed to contain depths he hadn't noticed. "Before subtle variations that reminded him of twilight skies on Earth, Nera," he began, uncertain how to express what had been building inside him. "These past days working with you," the ship's alert system chimed softly, interrupting him. "Anomalous resonance pattern detected in interface chamber," the AI announced calmly. They exchanged a quick glance before hurrying back to the chamber, professional duty temporarily overriding personal feelings. The crystalline fragments were pulsing rapidly, emitting a pattern they hadn't seen before. Nera immediately went to her station, fingers flying across the controls. "It's a warning," she said, brow furrowed. "They're detecting something approaching, something that disrupts their harmony." Julian checked the ship's sensors. "Nothing on our conventional systems, but wait." He adjusted the settings to match the resonance frequency. "There's something at the edge of the system moving fast." Captain Winslow's voice came through the comm. "All senior staff to the bridge. Unknown vessel approaching at superluminal velocities." As they hurried to the bridge, Julian's hand briefly caught Nera's. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm glad we shared that medical bed." Her emerald eyes met his, understanding the meaning behind his words. "As am I," she replied softly. The moment was brief, but in it lay unspoken promises, feelings, neither had fully acknowledged, but both increasingly recognized. Then they were on the bridge, facing a new challenge together. The main view screen showed a massive vessel approaching, sleek, predatory, and unmistakably armed for conflict. "Harvester ship," Nera whispered, her voice tight with recognition. "They strip planets of resources, including crystalline formations like the resonance. They've been pursuing such materials across multiple systems." Julian's mind raced with implications. The resonance were warning us. They sensed the harvesters coming. Captain Winslow turned to them, his expression grave. "Can we communicate with these harvesters?" "They don't communicate," Nera replied. "They take." As the harvester ship drew nearer, Julian moved closer to Nera, their shoulders touching. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything since that first misunderstanding in the medical bay, together, bridging the gap between different worlds. The bridge hummed with tense activity as the harvester ship decelerated into standard orbit, its massive silhouette eclipsing the stars. Twice the size of the horizon, its hull was scarred from numerous encounters, weapon systems prominently displayed. "They're scanning us," Lieutenant Ortiz reported from Tactical. "And the planet's surface." Captain Winslow stood firm. "Options?" "The horizon isn't equipped for combat," Julian said, stating the obvious. "But we have something they don't, an established connection with the resonance." Nera stepped forward. "Captain, if we could strengthen our harmonic link with the crystal entities, coordinate with the planetary formations." "So you're suggesting an alliance?" Winslow asked. "A symbiosis," Nera corrected. "We help them communicate across their distributed consciousness. They help us defend against the harvesters." Julian was already calculating. "We'd need to modify the main deflector array, channel the resonance patterns through it, but the power requirements would be enormous." "What would happen?" the captain asked. Julian and Nera exchanged glances. "Theoretically," Julian explained, "we could help the resonance create a harmonic disruption field. It wouldn't destroy the harvester ship, but it might disable their systems temporarily. Long enough to send a distress signal to the Science Council fleet in the neighboring system," Nera added. Captain Winslow nodded grimly. "Do it. You have full authorization." The next hours passed in a blur of focused activity. The harvester ship maintained its position, methodically scanning the planet, seemingly unconcerned with the small research vessel. They were buying time, Julian knew, time they desperately needed. In the interface chamber, Julian and Nera worked feverishly, their movements synchronized without need for words. The crystalline fragments pulsed with increasing intensity as they channeled more power into the system. "The modifications are complete," Julian finally announced. "But there's a problem. Someone needs to manually stabilize the harmonic field from the deflector control room. The automated systems can't handle the feedback." "I'll go," Nera said immediately. Julian shook his head. "You're the better communicator with the resonance. I should go." Their eyes met, a world of unspoken feelings passing between them. "We don't have time to argue," Nera said softly. "The harvester ship is powering weapons." Julian made a decision. "We both go. The captain can initiate the sequence from the bridge." They hurried to the deflector control room, a rarely used chamber near the ship's outer hull. Through the viewport, they could see the harvester ship, its weapon ports glowing with building energy. "Deflector modifications online," Julian reported through the comm. "Ready to channel resonance patterns. Initiating in 30 seconds, Captain Winslow responded. "Brace for potential feedback." As the countdown began, Julian turned to Nera. "There's something I need to say, in case this doesn't work." Her emerald eyes met his. "I know, Julian, I feel it too." "Not just friendship," he clarified. "Something more. Something I didn't expect to find out here among the stars." "A resonance," Nera said, her violet lips curving into a smile. "A harmony between different notes." The ship shuddered as the harvester fired a warning shot across their bow. 10 seconds to initiation," came the captain's voice. Julian reached for Nera's hand, twining his fingers with hers. "In my culture, this means connection, choosing to hold on, even in danger." "In mine as well," she replied, squeezing his hand. The deflector array activated with a high-pitched whine, channeling the combined resonance of the ship's crystalline fragments and the planetary formations below. The control room filled with vibration, panels flickering as power surged through the modified systems. Through the viewport, they watched as waves of visible distortion rippled outward, washing over the harvester ship. Its lights flickered, weapons powering down as the harmonic disruption interfered with its systems. "It's working!" Julian exclaimed. Suddenly a power conduit ruptured overhead, showering the room with sparks. Julian instinctively pulled Nera close, shielding her with his body as a section of ceiling collapsed. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but he maintained his grip on both Nera and the control console, keeping the resonance field stable. "Julian, you're hurt," Nera gasped. "Just a scratch," he managed through gritted teeth. "Keep the field focused." Together they held the controls, adjusting the harmonics as the planet-wide crystalline network joined their efforts. The harvester ship drifted, its systems temporarily paralyzed by the resonance field that defied their technological understanding. "Distress signal sent and acknowledged," Captain Winslow reported. "Science Council vessels responding, ETA 18 minutes. When it was finally over, the harvester ship retreating as Council vessels arrived, the resonance pulsing with what could only be described as satisfaction, Julian and Nera found themselves back in the medical bay. This time, Dr. Takeda treated Julian's injured shoulder while Nera watched with concern. "Just like old times," Julian joked weakly. "You have a strange definition of romance, Engineer Freeman," Dr. Takeda muttered, applying regenerative gel to his wound. "There, try not to tear it open again." She left them alone, shaking her head. Nera moved to sit beside him on the medical bed. "So," she said, her voice soft, "on your world, what happens after two people acknowledge their connection? After they choose each other?" Julian smiled, reaching for her hand. "Usually there's time to explore it, to learn each other's worlds more deeply. No rush, no cultural obligations, just two people discovering what they might become together." "I would like that," Nera replied, her silver-green hair catching the light as she leaned closer. "A journey of discovery." "It won't always be easy," Julian warned. "Different worlds, different customs." "Like harmony," Nera said thoughtfully. "The most beautiful kind requires different notes, played together." Her emerald eyes held his. "The resonance taught us that." Outside the viewport, the crystalline formations on the planet glittered in the light of the rising sun, their network spanning continents, separate yet connected, different yet harmonious. not unlike the bond forming between two beings from distant worlds who had found against all odds a resonance of their own. Julian smiled, feeling the warmth of her hand in his. "I'm ready for that journey if you are." "I am," Nera replied simply, and in that moment the medical bay became not a place of misunderstanding, but the beginning of something chosen, a connection forged not from cultural obligation, but from the rarest harmony in the universe, love freely given across the stars.